Welcome to Metapod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of Metapod, Ron Crabtree.
It's Ron Crabtree here, back with another episode of Metapod, where we explore the three common challenges that organizations face, especially in manufacturing in North America, is digitization, digital transformation of work, the forever labor shortage, and just plain getting more done with less, less of everything, people, logistics, facilities, and headaches, overhead headaches too. And we've got a really interesting guest here on the show here, Derek Crager. I'll ask him to introduce himself here in a moment. I really liked, the narrow, deep down focus around one of the critical labor shortages that industries of every type face is skilled trades. The people that keep our equipment running, the facilities working like they should be, even keeping computers running and infrastructure. Just in general, anybody that requires significant skills to be able to fix, repair, and maintain all of the things we need to operate our businesses. So the topic he came up with, I think is pretty neat, is how can the skilled trade shortage be solved or at least mitigated with the practical application of artificial intelligence? And artificial intelligence is one of many different things we apply from a digital transformation perspective. But I really like how Derek put together some pretty good thoughts on, how do we get a clear understanding of how voice-based AI and other tools can be leveraged and bypass some of the technical hazards. So if we're really into, how can we get a lot more done with less with the same people we have, how to do a much better job of onboarding new employees with these skilled trades kinds of jobs, you'll get a lot out of this episode. So Derek, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you. I actually came out of high school and I went to college and trade school at the same time. I ended up following through an apprenticeship and worked industrial construction, doing a lot of setup for manufacturers, whether it be Ford, Chrysler, GM. I've also worked in companies, pharmaceutical, like Eli Lilly, putting their plant in, which is just near me in Indianapolis. RCA, GE, just the gamut. It was a lot of contract work that was out there. I ended up going in-house, as we called it, and worked automotive manufacturing for about 15 years. And during that time, I went from the floor to engineering to process engineering. And then once I came out of that, I actually worked in my own company for a bit, built the largest company of its size for my state of Indiana, which Indiana's not huge, but that felt like a feather in my cap. And ended up coming back to manufacturing in the automotive sector once again, spent about 3 years in food manufacturing. And during this transition from floor to engineer, I eventually came to learning from my last few roles. Ended up spent half a decade at Amazon on RME, and RME stands for reliability, maintenance, and engineering. So, the people that turn the wrenches and make sure that there's wrenches there to be turned. So while I was there, I had a feather in my cap. I had a lot of help, had about 100 people that I organized, and thousands of hours went into it. But I built Amazon's highest rated employee onboarding program in their global history, and it felt good.
Was that just for maintenance repair operations? Did that include the pick operations too?
Well, the rating is global across. Now, the onboarding that I did was RME specific for maintenance side of things, but if people are familiar with NPS scores, we had a 92 NPS score, which is like uncrazy, unheard of.
So defined MPS score?
NPS, Net Promoter Score, it's that, if you rate this 1 to 10 as the individual comes out. So, a lot of times we just kind of, I'll just pick a 5 or a 6. It was okay. But again, I'm not taking full credit for the success. I'm taking credit for organizing all some good people that were there.
Yeah, so that promoter score would be a crucial, indicator of success that you're being an employer of choice in the marketplace to compete for scarce resources and folks to work in our company. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. And it wasn't just the employee side that was benefiting, the company benefited because during this time, just in 2021, Amazon doubled the size of their bricks and mortar structure. And we went from 35,000 to 70,000 skilled tradespeople. And also, what we had to contend with was that my program addressed the 83% attrition rate, which meant that we were losing people as fast as we were getting them. So, overall, the company ended up saving over $150 million a year just from reduced attrition rate because they had, happy employees. So it's truly a win-win.
It's an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that. So, what I'd love to do now is pivot and kind of get into a diagnostic, maybe spend the next 10 minutes or so and talk about three critical areas you think organizations should be carefully evaluating for opportunity, threat, or challenge around, skilled trades and how do we get as much done as we can? How do we determine how big our problem is? How can we diagnose for folks that don't know a lot about skilled trades or have no idea of how to even get started leveraging AI? What do we go look for? What are we going to measure? What kinds of questions do we need to ask to understand how big is the opportunity?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And it's it's important to understand we've had the skilled trade shortage for over 30 years. So I had a employer talk to me last week who said, "We've been living over so long, we don't even know we're handicapped with our capability." But those questions that you ask about, it's really anytime that maintenance gets involved, anytime the skilled trades are involved, it's usually when operations is down. So the ideal situation for skilled trades is that you pay them to do nothing. They're sitting on the sideline because if skilled trades is doing nothing in a general sense, that means operation is hitting 100%. They're getting that top OEE scores. Their production is up. When production's running, they're making money. Anytime skilled trade gets involved, they're losing money, the company overall. So one of the questions you want to ask yourself is there a knowledge gap here? Does operation slow down or stop when a specific person isn't available? And that might be the person in that department or on the shift or in that location. That's they're the ones that are called when something happens. So that would be a weak point on the oh gosh, what do you say? Like on the Lean Six Sigma measurement side.
I need to interrupt for just a second because you mentioned an acronym that I think is important for the audience to grasp. You mentioned OEE, which is overall equipment effectiveness, and there's three major components to calculating OEE, which, oh, by the way, is crucial measurement if you're in tangible goods industries using equipment to make stuff. And it's percentage of time the process is running that's scheduled to run. In other words, if I schedule for 80 hours a week, it runs 80 hours. That's 100% as scheduled. The second component is it running at the rate it's supposed to? In other words, if it's supposed to make 100 parts an hour, is it making 100 or more? And if it's not, that's a problem. And then finally, unplanned downtime or outages, right? It's down without plan. That's where the maintenance operations talking about skilled trades. So it's percentage of time that we're not running due to the equipment's broken, right? It's not available to us for whatever reason. So what Derek was saying here is crucial because if we are tracking OEE, shame on us. That's a great, metric. But then really understanding the root cause of why the uptime isn't what it needs to be is crucial. And sometimes it comes to what he was just saying, are we properly using skilled trades to proactively get out in front of and make sure the equipment doesn't need interventions because of unplanned breakdowns? Is that track in your mind?
Yeah, 100%. I'll throw another acronym out there, PM. So when I state it's the desire of all skilled trades to sit on their hands and do nothing, like Ron said, that's respective of the fact that they've done some good PM or preventative maintenance to make sure that that equipment runs when it's supposed to. And there's usually windows for that support of that preventive maintenance. It's either between shifts or during lunch, and that's helped keeps those OEE numbers up that Ron talked about. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Getting back to the questions. The first one is, does operation slow down if you're missing a key person? Next one is, are new hires taking longer than expected to contribute? So we hire people on the floor and we promise them we're going to train them, but then we're short staffed and we end up not training them. They end up a lot of times just being an extra hand, kind of like Dad said, "You hold the flashlight for me, son." So that's that other point, and it maybe when troubleshooting is a third point here that if troubleshooting is like, well, it's broke, let's call Mike. Is there only one person you connect with? And what happens when Mike leaves? Well, when Mike leaves, so does the fix. So those are probably the three areas.
Yikes, a big yikes.
Yeah, yeah. So we just want to make sure you have a consistent way to train everybody on the floor, regardless of shift or role. There's if you've been on the floor, which many of your listeners have, it's day shift is there for show. Night shift is the one that gets it all done. Now there's some pushback depending on what shift you're on, who you vote for. But a lot of times that's true because there's so much political stuff going on during the day that it's tough for those knowledgeable to get things done. And because of seniority, those that are knowledgeable end up on days when they can do the least work. So that's usually where that gap comes in on the floor is evenings, nights, and even weekends.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, what Alan Willett talked about the wisdom gap and the fact that we don't always think carefully about, our boomers as they're getting older and getting ready to exit. What is our program to make sure their replacements are already in the pipeline? What's our program to make sure all shifts are getting, coached and mentored? So really good point there. Thank you. What else should we be looking at and thinking about?
Well, are the most experienced workers the most skilled, the most knowledgeable, which, by the way, usually get paid the same as those that aren't as knowledgeable? Are they getting burnt out because they're getting called in, or they're the SME due to proximity? For example, you've probably heard somebody say, "If I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me to clear that jam or clear that alarm, I could retire," meaning that they're over leveraged. And that's not a good sign is when you're taxing out your most skilled people. We really want to support our most skilled people. Wouldn't you agree?
I completely agree with that. And what you were just mentioning there makes me think about the term autonomous maintenance. I don't know if that's in your lexicon, but the way I understand it and advocate it is to what degree can the operators who run the equipment handle routine activities like cleaning, inspection, adding fluids, or clearing a jam properly? We teach the operators and make it part of their work to actually do some of that maintenance activity. You advocate that?
Sounds like total maintenance.
And a maintenance strategy, right?
Yeah, that came up big in the manufacturing I was at in the 80s, and I like that. Depending on the skilled trade role, I've been in union shops and non-union shops, so there's that political factor that kinda determines what's what. I know that, in some of our roles, especially in automotive manufacturing, where there are truly lots of parts moving on both sides, we have the true operators, we have the true skilled trades, and then generally they had somebody that was like a unique position. They would call them an oiler or a lubricator that would fulfill a lot of those spiders. I've heard them called spiders that would fulfill that transitional role. So yeah, in the right environment, it's the operator knows that machine better than anybody because they're there collectively 24 hours a day, watching it run, hearing the hums, the bells, the whistles. And that's one thing I always encourage our maintenance team and maintenance managers to do is interface with those operations personnel and just talk to them like they're humans. It's not us or them. They are your eyes and your ears to the insides of that machine. And I know if you had a spouse that came home and they said their car is making this click, 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 we'd immediately run to the garage and pop the hood, right? So the same thing, if we just have a good relationship with those operators, we can resolve issues before they become a big downtime problem.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So what else would you advocate diagnosing, trying to understand, the scope and the opportunity that may exist before we get into what do you do to address it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Do new hires, whether they're official full pay or they're coming in as apprentice or trainees or interns, do they feel overwhelmed and unsupported when they come in? And that leads into as a company, do you have a method, a procedure to preserve that critical knowledge? And a lot of times we refer to that as tribal knowledge. And tribal knowledge, just for definition of the show here, in essence, is the knowledge that is not written down. It's told through storytelling. And the only way to learn it is if you get a chance to work with, well, let's keep using Mike in this case, that one old guard that knows everything, and you've got 99 other people who will never have time to work with Mike. So now it's like the telephone game we played in second grade. By the time somebody gives the facts or the steps, and then somebody hears it, they perceive it different, and then they try to replicate that and pass it on to somebody else. Now, when it's always turn this valve on, it becomes always turn this valve off through some type of iteration for the communication. So it's important to have that all the knowledge documented, so it doesn't walk out the door when your expert or your SME retires, or goes on vacation for that matter.
Well, we're going to get into diagnostic pretty quick, but one of the things that's a fact is, creating training, standard operating procedures, standard work, maintenance operations is right in the middle of that. And what I try to explain to customers is you're never going to document everything perfectly. In fact, you'll probably die of old age before you get that done. But it is crucial to really understand where it's most important first and focus in on the 10, 20, 30% of the activities that are really 80% of the benefit and try to get really good at least to get started. But I really like what you're going to be sharing about how do we leverage AI tools, for example, and voice recognition and some other methods to create that training, contain that training, retrieve it, and present it at the point of attack. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that because creating training is monstrously difficult. It takes a lot of time. I've done a lot of organizational design, work and instructional design work, and just writing up a good SOP for how to do maintenance properly on a machine, for standard work for operators, for example, that's an intimidating task if you're going to do it correctly. Pictures, illustrations, safety, boom, 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 boom. There's all these components. So anything else on the diagnostic before you tell us how to go fix some of these issues?
Well, you peeked right into that, Ron. It's can your employees get that expert guidance at the moment of need? So
Got it.
there's a sector that's called work instruction, which a lot of times, at least until the current generation of products that we're working with, work instruction could be something as simple as having a flyer in your hand or one of those process map visuals that are on the side of the machine, or a tablet or a laptop where you can scroll through a PDF. Now, if you're scrolling through a PDF, somebody that works with their hands, they're not working right here. And to cap that out, the trifecta is, does that support model, is it reactive or is it proactive? So are you teaching because you're so far behind to solve problems when they happen? Expect this to happen twice tonight. This is going to happen before morning. At midnight, that always happens. Or are you teaching at a proactive mode? So there's a transition period where you can't just flip the switch and say, okay, I'm just going to be proactive from here on out because you haven't dealt with the issues yet. So that probably wraps up the assessment points as diagnostics is just understanding all of these issues, and put those new words in your lexicon, so you have a starting point when you for a solution when you get out on the floor.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that because, I think it's really important to understand you've got to diagnose and really understand how big or small the opportunity is. And clearly, if your OEE is suffering, you're having a lot of turnover, can't find people for love your money to hire even at any price, which is true in many places of the world or many places of the country. And depending on the industry, there's a lot of competition for scarce talent. So yeah, we've got the problem. So what do we do? How do we leverage AI and technology to break through on that?
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And at this point, I want to say that when we hear AI, people start screaming and running down the corridors and waving their hands and said, AI is going to take my job. AI is going to take my job. Well, I tell you what, a message to those people that are worried about losing their job: go apply to skilled trades, get in an apprenticeship, find a manufacturing, because we're short. You will never be out of the job if you move over to skilled trades. It's been sure for 30 years. And for the skilled trades people, AI is a tool to empower you, to make you irreplaceable. It's just is a way to augment your knowledge in real time. AI will never be able to hold a wrench. It won't be able to set the torque to 76 foot-pounds and hear that click and feel it at the right time. So that's my public service announcement, Ron.
Was awesome.
Yeah, just speaking for skilled trades everywhere. So, to address the knowledge gaps and that downtime, the questions that we started off from, voice AI or voice activated mentors can do two things. It can record that tribal knowledge that's out there from your best people as a walkthrough, because those that work with their hands, and I'm included, it's much more fun to work than it is to write something down. And that's why it doesn't happen. Even those that are asked to write down an SOP, they don't know. They work a lot of times subconsciously and reacting to what's there or planning ahead for PM, but they cannot structure themselves into an SOP. And even if we did, a single map of what could happen will never actually encompass everything that could happen. So that's one part. You can use a voice interface to record that knowledge. And for example, at a there's an electrician working a packaging plant, and he captured his walkthroughs on how to reset 9 legacy machines where they always, at the right time, wrong time, the troubleshoot those false faults. So when he retired, he had all that documentation saved just from doing an interview over a telephone, and now his entire team could get that answer. Um, Another point is logging that downtime correctly, categorizing it. Don't just say it's up or down. And this is generally a partnership between skilled trades and operations. Don't just say it was down. If there's a knowledge gap, list it as a knowledge gap so you can begin identifying opportunities for improvement, because knowledge gaps can be addressed. Boom. With AI, they can be addressed instantly. Your best worker, I'm going to stick with Mike. Mike's a good name. He's a good guy. He can document everything he knows, and now everybody would have access to Mike's knowledge domain just through earbuds. They can talk to a virtual Mike and get answers to questions. So there was gosh, what was it? One client we were working with, they discovered that 18% of their unplanned downtime was due to this expert unavailable moment. And once they realized that, they thought, wow, 18%, if we just increased operations production by 18%, that's a lot of zeros, right? I mean, some operations, we're talking hundreds of thousands a minute, millions per hour type of thing. So yeah, every percent we're fighting for. And the third way that you can address that knowledge gap and plan to address downtime before it happens is role play recovery scenarios. So without the go-to person present, that Mike in this case, Mike's on vacation in Honolulu, Hawaii. So let's just role play what happens when this consistent item goes down or operation 3 goes down, and run your shift without Mike and just find out how well you do. So without any additional work instruction support, and then after with virtual AI, there was had to make Steve here. He has a maintenance manager. He had his team handle a minor fault, and without their single tech, their senior tech. I'm excited over this. I'm stumbling over my words, Ron. I apologize.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. In fact, I'm going to interrupt because you said something there that was super important. Around overall equipment effectiveness, right? And then, but just pointed out something I didn't want the audience to miss, that we've got to become more skilled as an organization around measuring the root cause for the unplanned downtime. And what Mike said was, or I'm sorry, what Derek said here was super important, that you got to go right back to, is it truly a knowledge gap? We didn't have access to the person, or just access to the knowledge, the information to take the right steps. That's like crucial. I would argue that in most organizations, at least 20%, if not 50 to 75% of unplanned downtime is because you're waiting or you're looking or hunting for what to do versus having that information immediately available. So I would argue that 18% will probably be on the low side from a root cause perspective.
Yeah, it may very well be, Ron. It may very well be, and that knowledge gap isn't just from your senior tech, whatever role they're in. It could be domain specific. You have OEM manufacturer come in and they generally train day shift for 2 to 4 hours, and half of that's lunchtime and breaks. But not everybody on day shift even gets trained on new equipment when it comes in. So now you're talking about it's instantly tribal knowledge because second shift didn't have access to the expert, nights and weekends didn't have access to the expert. So this is a way to, when that expert is there for the OEM, document that, and now everybody across all shifts has access to it, and you can avoid those downtime moments.
Yeah, that's great. And I know the next diagnostic or the next thing you want to get into is integrating voice-based training, right at the beginning. One of the things I was curious about, and whether or not this is part of your experience, is you've got the voice and the sound, but then there's also the image. Having the picture is worth 1,000 words. I've seen cases in the past where somebody wears a device as they're walking through a warehouse and they're seeing and talking about things, so you can actually have an image of what they're talking about along with the advice. Is it all pure voice, or is there some combination of those technologies out there? So I'll let you just get into what you would prepare.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, those voice and it would be AR, which is augmented reality. It's becoming more viable to the classes. The equipment's getting smaller and smaller, but smaller technology means more money. So yeah, ideally, boy, put everybody with AR glasses on, AR goggles on. They walk around the facility and the lights just come on. Press here, torque 30 there, and they just really connect the dots. But there's such a capital expenditure to get that equipped, and then once you have those sensitive equipment, they get broken easily. So in between pure paper and pure AR augmentation is where we reside and we thrive in, and it's this voice support. So in a situation where somebody would call, phone a friend, I think was the phrase on the game show on TV. When you would phone somebody, and it might be Mike at 2 a.m. on a Saturday because nobody else is available. But in those situations, and as helpful as that is, that's how we solve most of the problems now is with a phone call to the SME, the subject matter experts. So in place or in proxy of Mike answering the call at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, which isn't scalable. Maybe they've got another machine down at the other end of the facility, and Mike's already on the call, and uh, and just wants to go back to bed for goodness sake. But this is where we utilize AI, this voice interface, to access that knowledge domain for that specific role. So there's three things you look at. You integrate voice-based training, this voice-based AI on day one, not day 30. That way, a user gradually onboards to it and understand it, and they're not overwhelmed when you introduce this hands-free tool later on. Capture from your best people. How do I explain this to a newbie? And this would fall under that telephone interview on how do I prime this pump? How do I do a PM here? How do I replace the bearing on op two? And the SME through this phone interview can just talk through it non-technically. I mean, even though we're techs, right? But they can eliminate the jargon and just focus on actionable words. And the third part of this equation is Mike's only going to be available so many times. And usually, if you see him pop onto a site, your top tech to resolve an issue, he's gonna expect you to be perfect from then on, but that's not gonna happen. Limited availability of mic and what happens when he leaves. So this voice interface to this AI infused knowledge domain allows smart repetition. So it not only teaches in the flow of work, but allows the workers to repeat these complex steps, this hands-on real-time coaching, things that you can't do in a classroom. Or even when we do it in the classroom, right, on these educational machines, they say, go through it once and then, they turn you loose. So that repetition that we don't have time to pay people to do effectively. I've always heard that, do something three times, work through it three times, and then you'll own it for life. So those are the big three that I think fall under that.
Okay. So that's pretty interesting. I know you're going to get into scaling expert knowledge next, but just thinking about, what you shared there, I'm going to guess that, augmented reality is kind of like, we'd love to do that. But as you already mentioned, that's very expensive, to get into it. And then you're back to building all that, right? There's just a limit to how much you can and how quickly you can go. I'm going to guess, and you can share with us later, that the cost comparison between being able to get to the voice activated and being able to basically interact with and hear the answers like you're calling the expert, the cost for doing that has got to be a fraction of what a true AR or augmented reality solution might be.
Oh, absolutely. And if we're looking at, we're not replacing trainers, but because we don't even have enough people to fill the slot. But we're talking pennies on the dollar in both realms for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to ask more about that later. So let's get into that third area around scaling of expert knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So scaling, in the example I gave earlier, Mike's only available in that role for one call at a time, and generally, especially in a union situation, you're not even going to be able to call Mike, so he's only available on shift. So scaling, we were talking about scaling. It's how many people can access that information instantly at the same time across all shifts, all buildings with that operation. And can you do that without hiring 20 people? You could have 20 people learning, um, but you can't have 20 people teaching. I mean, our bean counters won't let that happen, right? Our accountants are going to say, no, we don't have enough money for that. Just get by. So that's the scaling part. And another part of that is I mentioned night shift earlier. Night shift, a lot of times, for various reasons, has problems that day shift never sees, or day shift doesn't see it until it's been an operation has been down for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, and then they only see the result of that. So being able to capture is the form of scaling because now you can capture 24 hours a day instead of just when your top technicians are there. And then, I think the third part of scaling is that if you stop treating experience as a fixed asset, because fixed assets, they're limited and there's a dollar per dollar cost. But if you start treating experience as a shareable, repeatable system, so it's more so than just printing out a copy of the SOP or handing out an operations manual or a maintenance manual to every person. I mean, you could do that, but even printing manuals, that's not scalable because of the cost in printing and availability and use case because you're using your hands. So what we do is virtual scenario here, this hands-free voice AI experience that's is access to a telephone call, is that it's the knowledge is there and anybody and everybody can use it, and not just once, but 1,000 people simultaneously if that need ever arose. So it's that scaling. Anytime you hear scale in a business or enterprise environment, scaling means you're going to spend less money overall and your uptime is going to be higher for sure.
Yeah, I really like this point you're making about not treating, experience as an asset. Do you have an example, a case study example of that in play?
Um, yeah, let me look here. I made some notes. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, take a second and do that because my head is spinning, right, with other questions I might ask. Right.
Yeah. Well, one example is when your top technician isn't fully educated on the system. So we had an automation integrator that delivered at a plant I was at, and the plant manager was there and asked, "Well, what happens if our lead person quit? The one person that you're training right now, what happens if they quit?" And the response was, "Don't worry. because we document all this. Just ask your AI, and they will walk it through you just like Mike would if he was here.
That is an awesome story. So I'm really liking this because it's a practical matter. Most organizations can't afford to do it perfect, right? Augmented reality for every single thing we do. It's just not in the reach of something we can do. As a practical matter, we've got 5,000 things we need to document and capture, and it'll never get done. But this approach sounds a lot more scalable. So tell us a little bit about what your company offers as a solution, products, just a brief description of, solution set you guys offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity, Ron. My company is Practical AI because we truly believe that AI and technology should be used in a practical and pragmatic way. There's so many headlines out there that get in the way that distract us. So that's not a good thing. Our flagship product is called Pocket Mentor, and Pocket Mentor because we all carry our mobile phones in our pocket. Our solution is not software based. It's not app based. You don't need an app. You don't need internet. Anytime that you work in an enterprise where you get on Wi-Fi, wow, any software salesperson that's tried to integrate a software at a facility, they say no, it's just an absolute no. Or you have interference where they don't want, for security access, they don't want Wi Fi on the floor. So, in those instances, our system actually leverages no screen, no app, no laptop required, no boot up and trying to log into the network. You just pull out your phone, you tap your earbud, your Bluetooth headset, and you start talking. And it's as easy as every operation or every machine has a QR code. And the QR code, you just scan it so you don't even have to remember. You're always going to be talked into
Wow.
knowledge base. So, those QR codes, they use them for web URLs and that. But we discovered there's also an opportunity. There's a TEL front end that will automatically just show a phone number on your phone. And then you just tap call. And it's like, hi, I'm Mike with Pocket Mentor. I see you're on Op 1. What are we working on today? And that's our tool. It's simple, it's scalable. You don't have to fight with the enterprise IT department for trying to get on their Wi-Fi. It's available to all, and we're just enjoying it because I came from the floor, Ron. I told you that earlier, and just not having the right information, even the top tech, there's points where they don't have the right information, a torch setting or something of that nature, that it empowers everybody on the floor to be as good as the best tech. And now they're happy to continue working because and I'll finish with this thought. There's sayings out there, there's research that shows that money is not the reason that people stay or quit a job. Money is like third or fourth. So the top uses in the one or two across all sectors is, does the employee enjoy the job? Do they respect the job? Does the job respect them? And do they feel a sense of accomplishment? And with Pocket Mentor, that employee gets that sense of accomplishment, and Mike gets to sleep all night on Saturday night.
What a story. I really like that. So, Derek, you shared a lot in a hurry here. I mean, probably opens up a lot of questions in people's minds about the practicality, doing what you've suggested. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, just my name, Derek Crager, and there's not many of us out there. But if you want to look and peruse our tools that we've created, just go to practicalai.app, practicalai.app. That's Apple, Paul, Paul. And then the practical AI part is just phonetic. You can sound it right out.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Ron. It's been great to be here today.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Metapod. And be sure to like it. Be sure to share it with your network. And we appreciate your support. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining Metapod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree three ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.